at the beginning of my course on 19th and 20th century Eastern Europe, I don't see any veterans here. It's just a 500 level course. I assigned map quizzes. And so we've got 4 of them. This is the first one, so Imperial and Royal Habsburg Central Europe, then interwar East Central Europe. Then they have to draw on here the shifting boundaries for post-war Europe as things changed. Little here, and then post-Cold War East Central Europe. So let's just go back and forth. Isn't that fun? So even I couldn't quite match them up, but
I want to know why Dracula's castle is not on the map.
Sorry, I didn't draft the map. I stole it from a book. Okay, so but the names may change, right? Lemberg, Lvov, Lviv, Pressburg, Polsony, Bratislava, right? The names may change, but unlike the political boundaries around them, they remain stubbornly rooted in the same spot. Those boundaries, seem to shift and change, subdivide as if by mitosis, but the cities remain stubbornly there. And in many respects, it's this rootedness that makes the cities most interesting to me. We can read in these cities patterns that are at once larger and smaller than the story of the nation-state. Norman Davies, for example, has pictured Breslau, Wrocław as a microcosm. So the title of his book is Microcosm, so he's using it as a microcosm of the region, the city itself. And there's no doubt that for all their national differences, any guesses on the city?
No.
Okay, good. All right, for all their differences, these cities have a lot in common. Any guesses? Yeah, okay, well you figured it out because I saw the text. But look, read that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, there are lots of similarities. I mean, each has the smokestacks of the factories in the horizon. Of course, there are lots of salient differences. I don't mean to blithely, equate things that aren't necessarily equal. But cities, and especially those cities that became national capitals, are a proving ground for the national mythos and its accompanying teleological visions. But they're always much more than that. They have local, ethnic, civic, regional, and interurban histories too. And at certain moments, their citizens have been just as apt to stress their belonging to Europe as to the nation. So in this talk, I'd like to pay special attention to the ways that East Central European cities and their inhabitants have identified with a supra-urban and supranational term, Europe. What has this meant for the inhabitants of East Central European cities? I will argue that Europe has generally stood for an idealized vision of progress, empowerment, and affirmation. It at once seeks to enhance the nation and escape it. Okay, first perhaps I should provide a rough definition of my terms in my title. One, the temporal framework and terminology. I'm mainly talking about these cities during this period here, from about 1870 to 1910, 1914, when they experienced, nearly all of them, very rapid modernization. Krakow increased by 200% in this period, and even more with a few years later with the addition, as we'll learn today, of another community outside of in the suburbs. The Budapest story is phenomenal here. Łódź, the Polish Manchester, if you will, where the weaving and the textiles increased by 800%. So I'm mainly looking at this period at the turn of the century. I find it very interesting that it seems like a lot of these cities have capped out today between 1.5 million and 2 million, these capital cities. Vienna, of course, has lost population. It's no longer the metropole for an imperial power. So too has Trieste here. And it's also surprising that most of the other big cities at the turn of the century have about 700,000 in their population now. So there are some patterns, I think, that we can even observe rather superficially here. Okay, what then about the next term in the title, modernity? Well, according to Marshall Behrman's famous elaboration on a passage from the Communist Manifesto, modernity is the sensation of relentless change when, quote, all that is solid melts into air. Of course, later scholars have elaborated on this and have pointed out that despite the fact that people tend to think of modernity as a break with the past, I mean, certainly dramatic changes were occurring, it's not quite that simple, because the past always stubbornly persists. So for every sewer line that you want to lay, every subway line that you wish to lay, all the buildings, the tenements, everything that you tear down, the old warren of medieval streets, there's still that church, that building, all those remnants of the past. And I think in Europe, and especially in East Central Europe, you have these wonderful juxtapositions of the oldish and the new. In Krakow, I find it, this is a photograph I took in 2007. Here, there are actually electric streetcars coursing on the Renek, the main market square. And now they've been removed so people can walk, so it can be a pedestrian space. And I love this photo. I took this last summer as well. And you have now the postmodern, right? Where the guy is talking on his cell phone as he rides the antiquated bicycle from 100 years ago. Okay, now regarding identity, I'm heavily influenced by the research scholarship, a recent scholarship of Roger Brubaker and his colleague Frederick Cooper, who stressed the importance of moving beyond thinking in terms of identities as something fixed, in other words, nouns, to focusing instead on the process, verbs. So we're looking at identification or self-identification. This forces us to, one, acknowledge fluidity, and two, pay attention to the actor. Who's doing the identifying? Is someone identifying you, or are you identifying yourself? One of Brubaker's major contributions to the scholarship on identity formation is implicit in his title, Ethnicity Without Groups. The suggestion that we tend to lump ethnicities into groups and speak of them as if they're things, when in fact people's identities are much more complex and sophisticated and malleable than that. So depending on the context, the citizens of these cities, like moderns everywhere, have identified and continue to identify themselves in a number of ways. They may identify with their class, religion, gender. They may identify with their neighborhood, city, ethnic group, nation, or in a larger sense with modern urban civilization itself. In his masterpiece about the decrepit Habsburg Empire, The Man Without Qualities, Robert Musil observed, "For the inhabitant of a country has at least 9 characters. A professional one, a national one, a civic one, a class one, a geographical one, a sex one, a conscious, an unconscious, and perhaps even 2, a private one. He combines them all in himself, but they dissolve in him, and he is really nothing but a little channel washed out by all these trickling streams, which flow into it and drain out of it again in order to join other little streams filling another channel. Hence, every dweller on earth also has a 10th character, which is nothing more or less than the passive illusion of spaces unfilled. This interior space, which is, it must be admitted, difficult to describe, is of a different shade and shape in Italy from what it is in England, because everything that stands out in relief against it is of a different shade and shape. And yet, both here and there, it is the same, merely an empty, invisible space with reality standing in the middle of it, like a little toy brick town, abandoned by the imagination."